Have you ever found yourself staring at that textbook list for a new semester? A new, used, rental, ebook.
Oh, definitely. All those choices.
Each option feels different. Right?
Yeah.
But what if I told you every single one of those choices is, well, a pure economic decision at its core?
Absolutely. And those decisions aren't just about the price tag you see. They're fundamentally about the value you actually gain.
Okay.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into consumer and producer surplus. These are concepts that really unpack how both buyers and sellers can walk away from a market transaction feeling better off.
It sounds pretty fundamental for microeconomics.
It really is. It's foundational stuff.
So our mission today is basically to cut through the jargon.
Mhm.
We want to give you a really clear understanding of these crucial economic ideas.
Yeah, and we'll show you how those demand and supply curves you always see, well, they actually hold the key to measuring these benefits.
The goal is to get you ready to tackle economics courses, maybe exams, with confidence. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding why markets work, how they impact you directly.
And how to sort of visualize these dynamics even if you don't have a graph right in front of you.
Okay, let's start with you, the buyer. What exactly do you gain? I guess it all begins with something called your willingness to pay.
Right, your willingness to pay. It's simply the absolute maximum price you'd be willing to fork over for a good or service.
Let's stick with our used textbook example. Imagine 5 potential buyers. Aisha, who'd pay up to $59.
Okay.
Then Ben, up to $45. Chloe, $35. Darsh, $25. And maybe Elena, who only values it at $10.
So each person has their own kind of private valuation for that same textbook.
Exactly.
And it's this individual willingness to pay that when you line everyone up, from highest willingness down to lowest, that actually forms the demand curve itself.
Ah,
Yeah, if you just graph those few people, it looks a bit like a staircase. Each flat step shows one person's maximum price.
I can picture that.
But then scale that up. Imagine millions of buyers for, say, iPhones. Those little steps, they smooth out into the familiar downward sloping curve we always see. As the price drops, more people find it worthwhile to buy.
Okay, so let's say the campus bookstore sets the price for used textbooks at $30. We know Aisha, Ben, and Chloe are in because their willingness to pay is $30 or more.
Right. $59, $45, $35, they're all above $30.
But the real magic happens next, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How do we measure what they actually gain beyond just getting the book?
That's where individual consumer surplus comes in. It's the net gain for each buyer. You just take their willingness to pay and subtract the price they actually pay.
Simple enough.
So Aisha was willing to pay $59, but she only pays $30. Her gain, her surplus, is $29.
Okay, nice game for her.
Ben, willing to pay $45, pays $30, so he gains $15.
Got it.
And Chloe, willing to pay $35, pays $30, she gains $5.
And Darsh and Elena, their willingness was below $30.
Right, $25 and $10. So the price is too high for them, they don't buy, and their consumer surplus is zero. They don't participate in this transaction.
And if you add up all those individual gains, Aisha's $29, Ben's $15, and Chloe's $5, you get the total consumer surplus for this market, right?
Exactly. So $29 plus $15 plus $5, that's $49 in total consumer surplus. It represents the total benefit all the consumers together get from being able to buy at that $30 price.
And you mentioned visualizing this. How does that work on a graph?
Okay, picture that downward sloping demand curve. The market price is a horizontal line, say at $30. Consumer surplus is the entire area under the demand curve, but above that price line.
Ah, okay, that triangle shape we often see.
Precisely. For our few buyers, you could literally see it as the sum of those rectangles representing each person's gain. For a huge market like iPhones where the demand curve is smooth, it's still that same triangular-like area. It shows the total value consumers get over and above what they paid.
What's really interesting is how sensitive this is to price changes.
Yeah.
What happens if the price of those textbooks falls, say from $30 down to $20?
Well, consumer surplus definitely increases significantly. Visually, that area below the demand curve but above the price, it gets bigger.
How does it get bigger? Where does the extra surplus come from?
Good question. It comes from two distinct sources. You can almost imagine shading them differently on your mental graph. First, think about the existing buyers, Aisha, Ben, and Chloe.
They were already dying at $30.
Exactly. Now they only pay $20. So each of them pays $10 less per book. That's an extra $10 surplus for each of them, or $30 more in total surplus just for them.
Okay, like a bonus for the people already in the market.
Right. You can picture that as maybe a dark blue rectangle. It's the price drop $10 times the quantity they were already buying, $3.
In the second part.
The second part is the gain for new buyers. Remember Darsh, he was willing to pay $25.
Right, he wouldn't buy at $30.
But at $20, now he's in, he buys the book. And his surplus is his willingness to pay $25 minus the new price, $20, which is $5.
Ah, so the lower price brings new people into the market, and they get surplus too.
Exactly. And this new surplus for people like Darsh entering the market, you can visualize that as maybe a light blue area, like a little triangle that forms between the old price and the new price along the demand curve.
So the total increase in consumer surplus from that $10 price drop would be the $30 gain for existing buyers plus the $5 gain for the new buyer, Darsh. $35 total increase.
Precisely. And, of course, if the price had risen instead, say to $40, consumer surplus would shrink, existing buyers would lose out, and some might drop out of the market altogether.
This concept isn't just for textbooks, is it? You mentioned things like Facebook earlier. How does surplus work there? It seems free.
That's a fascinating case. Facebook earned, what, nearly $56 billion back in 2018 without charging users a monetary price.
So where's the transaction? Where's the price?
Well, it seems free, but economists would argue you're paying an effective price. You pay with your personal data, which they use for targeted advertising, and you pay with your attention, maybe annoyance from those ads.
Okay, so there is a cost. It's just not in dollars.
Right. And here's the kicker. For most users, that effective price seems to be incredibly low compared to the value they get from connecting with friends, sharing updates, seeing photos.
I mean, they get a huge amount of consumer surplus.
Massive amounts. They value the service much, much more than the cost of data privacy concerns or ad annoyance for many. And this huge pool of consumer surplus is what allows Facebook to generate enormous advertising revenue. They're essentially monetizing the value you get.
Wow. That really flips the perspective. It's not just about money changing hands.
Not at all. It's about perceived benefit versus perceived cost, even if that cost isn't obvious. It also helps explain why platforms like that are so sticky. The surplus keeps people coming back.
Let's shift gears to something really high stakes. Organ transplants. How can surplus possibly apply when we're talking about saving lives?
It's a sensitive area, obviously. With, over 113,000 Americans on waiting lists for organs like kidneys, a normal market system just isn't feasible or ethical. You can't buy and sell kidneys.
Right, so how are they allocated?
Well, the United Network for Organ Sharing, UNOS, handles this. They used to allocate kidneys primarily based on wait time, first come, first served, essentially.
Seems fair on the surface, maybe.
Perhaps, but from an economic efficiency standpoint, it wasn't great. Waiting time doesn't necessarily correlate with who will benefit most from the organ.
So what changed?
In 2013, they shifted to a system based on net survival benefit. They try to match kidneys based on how long the organ is expected to last with recipients based on how long they're likely to live after receiving it.
So it's about maximizing the total life years gained from each donated organ.
Exactly. It's not about who waited longest anymore, but about maximizing the overall benefit derived from that scarce resource. In economic terms, this is analogous to maximizing the total consumer surplus derived from the available organs.
Ensuring the organs go where they generate the most survival benefit.
Precisely. It leads to a much more efficient allocation, getting more total life years out of the same pool of donated kidneys. Of course, it raises tough ethical questions about fairness versus efficiency, especially for older patients, perhaps.
That's a complex trade-off, but it shows how the principle of maximizing surplus can apply even outside traditional markets.
Definitely. It's about getting the most value, however you define it, from a limited resource.
Okay, so we've dug into how buyers benefit. That's consumer surplus. But a market needs two sides. What about the sellers? What's in it for them? Let's flip over to producer surplus.
Right. Just like buyers have a maximum willingness to pay, sellers have a minimum they're willing to accept. We call this the seller's cost.
And cost here isn't just about money spent making something, is it?
No, crucially, it includes their opportunity cost. What do they give up by selling? For someone selling a used textbook, the cost might be the value they place on keeping it for their personal library, or maybe the minimum cash they need to feel it's worth the hassle of selling. It's the lowest price they'd say yes to.
Okay, so let's bring back our textbook example, but focus on sellers. Say Andrew's cost, his minimum price is $5, Brianna's is $15, Carlos's is $25, Desiree's is $35, and Eli's is $45.
Got it. Different minimums for each potential seller.
And these costs, these minimum acceptable prices, they form the basis of the supply curve, right?
Exactly. If you graph these sellers from lowest cost to highest, you again get that step-shaped curve, but this time it's stepping upwards. Each flat step is a seller's cost. As the market price goes up, more sellers find it worthwhile to sell, adding another step.
So if the market price is again $30, who sells?
Well, Andrew costs $5, Brianna costs $15, and Carlos costs $25 will all sell because $30 is above their minimum acceptable price.
And what's their gain, their surplus?
Andrew, whose cost was only $5, sells for $30. He gains $25. That's his individual producer surplus.
Yeah.
Brianna costs $15, sells for $30, gains $15. Carlos costs $25, sells for $30, gains $5.
And Desiree and Eli, their costs are $35 and $45.
Too high. The $30 market price isn't enough to meet their minimum, so they don't sell. Their producer surplus is zero.
So individual producer surplus is just price received minus cost.
Exactly. And if you sum up those individual gains, Andrew's $25, Brianna's $15, Carlos's $5, you get the total producer surplus. Here, it's $45.
And graphically, consumer surplus was below demand, above price. What about producer surplus?
Producer surplus is the area above the supply curve, but below the market price. Again, for a few sellers, it's the sum of their individual rectangular gains. For a smooth supply curve, like for wheat from millions of farmers, it's that triangular-like area trapped between the upward-sloping supply curve and the price line.
Okay, makes sense. It mirrors the consumer side. And just like consumer surplus, producer surplus must change when the price changes.
Absolutely. Let's say the price of wheat rises maybe from $5 to $7 per bushel. Producer surplus is definitely going up.
And again, does this increase come in parts?
Yes, two parts, similar to the consumer side. First, think about the farmers who are already selling wheat at $5.
Like the lower cost producers.
Right. They now get an extra $2 per bushel for all the wheat they were already planning to sell. That's a direct boost to their surplus. You can picture this as a solid red rectangle on a graph. The price increase times their original quantity.
A bonus for existing sellers.
Exactly. Second, the higher price of $7 might now be enough to tempt new farmers into the market, farmers whose costs were maybe between $5 and $7.
People who couldn't make it work at $5.
Right. They now enter the market and sell. Their gain is the difference between the new $7 price and their specific cost. Visually, this adds a sort of pink triangle to the producer surplus area, representing the gains for these new entrants.
So a price rise benefits both existing sellers and brings new ones in, increasing total producer surplus. And a price fall would do the opposite.
Precisely. A price fall would squeeze the surplus of existing sellers and likely force some higher-cost sellers out of the market entirely, reducing total producer surplus.
We see this play out in the real world constantly, don't we? You mentioned Iowa farmland values.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fantastic example. The price of good Iowa farmland is incredibly sensitive to the global prices of commodities like corn, soybeans, wheat.
So what happened there?
Well, from about 2000 to 2013, there was this huge run-up in farmland prices. They peaked at over $8,700 an acre in 2013.
Why such a dramatic rise?
It was directly tied to higher global food prices. You had booming demand from places like China and India, plus some bad weather hitting harvests elsewhere. This pushed up the prices farmers received for their crops.
Which means higher producer surplus for those farmers.
Exactly. Higher prices mean more producer surplus per acre. And what is farmland, really? It's an asset whose value is derived from the future stream of income the producer surplus it can generate. So when expected future surplus went way up, the price people were willing to pay for the land itself soared.
But then things changed, right? The prices dropped after 2013.
They did. By 2019, Iowa farmland prices had fallen about 22% from that peak.
And the reason?
A combination of factors. Increased global supply of crops started to push prices down, and then some international trade disputes further depressed the prices farmers received.
Lower prices mean less producer surplus.
Which means the expected future earnings from the land decreased, leading directly to a fall in farmland values. It's a very clear link between producer surplus and the value of the underlying asset. Buying farmland is essentially buying the right to that future surplus.
Okay, so we've got consumer surplus, the buyer's gain, and producer surplus, the seller's gain. Now let's put them together for the big picture. Gains from trade, market efficiency. What's the sum total?
That sum is called total surplus. It's simply consumer surplus plus producer surplus.
And what does that represent?
It represents the total net gain to society from all the buying and selling happening in that market. It's the combined benefit enjoyed by both consumers and producers.
So if we picture that big university textbook market, again, demand sloping down, supply sloping up, meaning at an equilibrium price, say $30, and maybe 1,000 books are traded, where is total surplus?
Total surplus is the entire area between the demand curve and the supply curve, all the way up to that equilibrium quantity of 1,000 books. It's the sum of the consumer surplus triangle on top, below demand, above price, and the producer surplus triangle on the bottom, above supply, below price.
That whole big triangle formed by the two curves meeting.
Exactly. And it visually demonstrates a key idea. Both consumers and producers gain from the existence of this market. There are always gains from trade when voluntary transactions occur.
And this leads us right into the idea of market efficiency. The claim is that markets, at least competitive ones, are usually efficient. What does that mean in practical terms?
Efficiency here means that the market equilibrium outcome, that $30 price and 1,000 books, maximizes total surplus. It means it's impossible to rearrange things, either who consumes or who produces, to make someone better off without making someone else worse off. The market has somehow perfectly allocated everything to get the biggest possible combined gain.
How can we be sure the market gets it right? Couldn't say a smart committee do better.
It's a good thought experiment. Let's imagine a committee tries to improve on the market outcome. First, what if they try to reallocate consumption?
Okay, like move books around after people have bought them.
Yeah. Suppose they take a book from Anna, who we know valued it highly. Maybe her willingness to pay was $35, and they give it to Braxton, whose willingness to pay was only $25.
Anna loses $35 in value, Braxton gains $25.
Exactly. Total surplus just decreased by $10. The market equilibrium already ensured that the books went to the people who valued them most highly, those with willingness to pay above $30. Messing with that allocation reduces overall welfare.
Okay, so reallocating consumption doesn't work. What about reallocating sales, forcing different people to sell?
Let's try it. Suppose the committee stops a low-cost seller, Xavier, cost $25 from selling his book. Instead, they force a high-cost seller, Yvette, cost $35 to sell hers, maybe compensating her somehow.
So society loses a low-cost sale, $25, and gains a high-cost one, $35.
Right. The cost of providing that book to the market increases by $10. Again, total surplus falls. The market equilibrium already ensured that the sellers with the lowest costs were the ones making the sales. Interfering reduces efficiency.
So you can't improve things by shuffling who buys or who sells. What about changing the quantity traded? Maybe trading fewer books or more?
Let's look at that. What if the committee mandated only 900 books be traded instead of the equilibrium 1,000?
Well, there must be a buyer willing to pay, say, $31 and a seller willing to accept $29 who now can't trade.
Exactly. We're missing out on a mutually beneficial transaction. That buyer's potential surplus and that seller's potential surplus are lost. Total surplus is lower than at equilibrium.
And if they force more books to be traded, say 1,100,
then you'd have to find a seller whose cost is, say, $35, like Yvette, and force them to sell to a buyer whose willingness to pay is only, say, $25, like Braxton.
that transaction loses money overall. The cost is higher than the value.
Precisely. Forcing trades beyond the equilibrium quantity, where the cost exceeds the willingness to pay, also reduces total surplus. The market equilibrium quantity is special because it includes all mutually beneficial trades and no detrimental ones.
So an efficient market seems to do four things automatically. It gets goods to the buyers who value them most. It gets sales from the sellers with the lowest costs. It ensures every trade that happens is beneficial to both sides, or at least break even. And it makes sure no mutually beneficial trades are left undone.
That's a perfect summary. Any deviation from that free market equilibrium, whether in allocation or quantity, will reduce the total surplus generated.
But you mentioned caveats. Efficiency isn't everything, is it?
No, it's definitely not. A crucial point is that efficiency doesn't necessarily mean fairness or equity. Remember the UNOS kidney allocation. Maximizing total life years saved is efficient, but is it fair to an older patient who might have waited longer?
That's a tough societal judgment call.
It is. Society often faces this trade-off between efficiency, making the economic pie as big as possible, and equity, how that pie is sliced. Fairness is subjective and depends on our values.
And the other caveat, markets aren't always efficient.
Right. Sometimes markets fail. There are specific conditions under which a free market won't maximize total surplus. We call this market failure, and we'll touch on why that happens.
Also, even an efficient market doesn't mean everyone is thrilled, right? Buyers always want lower prices, sellers always want higher prices.
Absolutely. Efficiency maximizes the total gain, but the distribution of that gain depends on the market price. Intervening to try and make one group happier, say by imposing a price ceiling to help buyers, often shrinks the total surplus available, making society as a whole worse off, even if some individuals benefit.
What about something like the sharing economy? Airbnb, Turo for cars?
Yeah.
How does that fit in?
That's a great modern example. The sharing economy essentially allows individuals to, as the book says, wring a little bit of value out of resources that were previously sitting idle, a spare bedroom, a car in the driveway most of the day.
So it connects people who have something they aren't using with people who need it temporarily.
Exactly. By creating a market and facilitating these matches, platforms like Airbnb increase efficiency. They allow existing resources to generate more value, more surplus than they otherwise would have. It's about better utilization and allocation, creating gains from trade where none existed before.
Making better use of what we already have. Okay, so if markets usually work so well, why? What are the underlying pillars that make them function?
Two things are absolutely critical: property rights and economic signals.
Let's start with property rights. What are they exactly?
Property rights are basically the rights of owners to use and, crucially, dispose of items or resources as they choose. Ownership.
Why is that so important for markets?
Because trade is about exchanging ownership. If you don't truly own something, you can't legally or effectively sell it. Imagine if students weren't allowed to resell their textbooks if the university somehow forbade it.
All those potential gains from trade we talked about, Andrew selling to someone who needs the book, couldn't happen.
Exactly. That restriction on property rights would prevent countless mutually beneficial transactions, reducing total surplus. Clear and enforceable property rights are the bedrock upon which voluntary exchange is built.
Okay, property rights are fundamental. What about economic signals?
An economic signal is any piece of information that helps people make better economic decisions. And the most important, most powerful economic signal in a market economy is price.
How does price act as a signal?
Think about it. The market price, say, $30 for that textbook, conveys an incredible amount of information very concisely. To a potential buyer, it signals that there are sellers out there whose cost is $30 or less. It tells them about the opportunity cost of acquiring the book.
And to a potential seller.
It signals that there are buyers whose willingness to pay is $30 or more. It tells them about the potential benefit of giving up the book. The price guides both sides. Should I buy? Should I sell? The price helps them make the decision that, collectively, maximizes total surplus without anyone needing to know all the details about everyone else's costs or values.
So the price coordinates everything almost automatically.
Incredibly effectively most of the time. Though prices can sometimes fail as signals. Think about the market for Lemons used cars. The price might not fully signal the car's true quality because the seller knows more than the buyer. That's called information asymmetry. But generally, prices are amazing coordinators.
So property rights let us trade, and prices tell us when it's worthwhile. But you mentioned markets sometimes fall short. Market failure.
Yes. Market failure occurs when a market, left to its own devices, fails to be efficient. It fails to maximize total surplus. It results in missed opportunities situations where resources aren't allocated optimally.
Why would that happen? What causes market failure?
There are three main reasons economists point to. First is market power. This is when a single buyer or seller, or a small group, has the ability to significantly influence market prices. Think of a monopoly.
How does that cause inefficiency?
A monopolist, for instance, might restrict the quantity supplied to drive up the price. This prevents some mutually beneficial trades from happening, trades where a buyer's willingness to pay is above the monopolist's cost, but below the artificially high price. Total surplus shrinks.
Okay, market power is one cause. What's the second?
Externalities. These are side effects of economic activities that impact third parties who aren't directly involved in the transaction. The classic example is pollution from a factory.
The factory sells its product, but the pollution harms local residents.
Right. The market price of the product doesn't reflect the cost of that pollution damage. Because that cost is external to the transaction, the market might lead to too much production of the polluting good, reducing overall societal well-being, total surplus when you account for the external costs.
Makes sense. And the third main cause?
This one bundles a few related issues. problems arising from the nature of the good itself. This includes public goods, like national defense or streetlights, which are hard to charge for, and one person's use doesn't stop others from using them. Markets tend to underprovide these.
Okay.
Also, common resources, like fish in the ocean or clean air.
Yeah.
Because nobody owns them outright, incomplete property rights, they tend to be overused, the tragedy of the commons.
Right.
And finally, situations with significant private information, like we mentioned with used cars, where one party knows much more than the other, leading to potentially inefficient outcomes. Often, these issues trace back to problems with property rights or the ability of prices to convey full information.
So market power, externalities, and issues with the nature of the good itself can all lead to inefficient markets.
Exactly. These are the areas where there might be a case for government intervention to try and improve efficiency, though that's a whole other complex topic.
To really appreciate how well markets usually work, despite these potential failures, it's sometimes useful to consider the alternative, isn't it? Like central planning.
Oh, absolutely. History provides some stark lessons there. Think about China's Great Leap Forward in the late 1950s.
What was the goal there?
It was a massive, centrally planned effort under Mao Zedong to rapidly industrialize China, partly by diverting huge amounts of agricultural labor towards backyard steel production. Farmers were told to make steel instead of growing food.
How'd that work out?
It was an unmitigated disaster. Not only was the steel produced often low quality and useless, but diverting labor from farms caused agricultural output to plummet, leading to one of the worst famines in human history. Estimates vary, but it's thought to have contributed to the deaths of around 30 million people. It was a catastrophic failure of central planning, a stark contrast to the resource allocation driven by market signals.
A truly great leap backward, as the textbook calls it.
Indeed. While modern China has embraced market mechanisms much more, remnants of central planning and significant market failures, like major pollution externalities, still pose huge challenges. It really underscores how vital reasonably well-functioning markets, property rights, and price signals are for generating prosperity and meeting basic needs.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap the core ideas. We've unpacked consumer surplus, the gain to buyers,
Producer surplus, the gain to sellers.
and total surplus, the sum of the two, representing the overall gains from trade in a market.
And we've seen how these concepts illuminate why competitive markets are typically so efficient at allocating resources, maximizing that total surplus.
We also touched on the crucial role of property rights in enabling trade and prices acting as vital economic signals guiding decisions.
And we noted the important exceptions market failures where markets don't achieve efficiency due to things like market power, externalities, or the nature of certain goods.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener. Next time you buy something, or maybe sell something online, take a second. Can you identify the surplus you gained? What were the signals, maybe the price, compared to your own value or cost, that guided your decision?
Yeah, these economic forces are operating all around us all the time. Once you start looking for them, you see them everywhere. Understanding consumer and producer surplus is really a massive step towards grasping how our economy actually functions day to day.
We really hope this deep dive has helped clarify these concepts and given you a shortcut to feeling well-informed and ready, whether it's for class, exams, or just understanding the world a bit better.
We hope it's been useful.
From everyone here at The Deep Dive, thank you so much for listening.